I was elbow deep in flour, rolling out pie crust with my grandmother's old wooden pin when my phone lit up on the counter. Grandma June was sitting across the kitchen island, shelling pecans into a ceramic bowl, humming some old hymn she couldn't name anymore, but never forgot the melody to. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked up the phone. It was a text from my mother, Diane. Headed to Costa Rica. Richard found the perfect villa. Use the trust account for the deposit. Don't worry, we left plenty. Kiss Mama June for us. Talk soon. I stared at the screen. Then I looked at my grandmother. She smiled at me with those soft gray eyes, a pecan shell stuck to her thumb. These are good ones, Sienna, she said. Your grandfather would have loved these. I set the phone down and leaned over to brush the shell off her hand. He sure would have, Grandma. Then, under my breath, so quiet only the flour dust could hear me, I whispered, good thing I froze that account at 9 o'clock this morning. If you're listening to this and you've ever had to be the adult in a family full of children who happen to be over 50, I need you to hear what happened after that text message. You have to understand Tidewater Inn to understand any of this. It's a 12-room bed and breakfast on the coast of Maine, about 40 minutes north of Portland. My grandmother June Hollis built it from nothing. She and my grandfather Walt bought the property in 1981 when it was just a rotting sea captain's house with a collapsing porch and a view that could break your heart. They spent 30 years turning it into something magical. Hand-painted signs, rooms named after lighthouses, breakfast every morning with homemade blueberry jam. It was never a gold mine, but it was ours. It was home. Grandpa Walt passed away 6 years ago, left everything to Grandma June, with a trust fund he'd set up to protect it all. The trust held $320,000. The rules were simple. That money existed for two purposes. First, to keep Tidewater Inn running as a family legacy. Second, to pay for Grandma June's care. She'd been diagnosed with vascular dementia 2 years ago. Some mornings she'd wake up sharp as a tack, cracking jokes about the guests and remembering every recipe by heart. Other mornings she'd stand at the front desk and ask me who all these strangers were in her house. My sister Wren and I had divided the labor. Wren is 27, a pastry chef who dropped everything to come back and run the inn's kitchen. She makes these lemon scones that guests drive 2 hours for. She handles the food, the flowers, the charm. I handle everything else. The books, the taxes, the maintenance contracts, the insurance, the guest disputes. I'm a fraud investigator by training. Spent 5 years at an insurance company in Boston chasing down people who lied for money. I quit to come home when Grandma's diagnosis got worse. But the skill set, that never leaves you. You learn to see patterns. You learn to read what people don't say. And you learn that the people most dangerous to you are usually the ones sitting at your own dinner table. Which brings me to my mother, Diane, and her husband, Richard. Richard is my stepfather. He came into our lives when I was 14. Charming, loud, the kind of man who walks into a room and expects everyone to rearrange themselves around him. He sold luxury cars for a living and talked about money the way some people talk about religion. Constantly, reverently, and always in terms of what he deserved. My mother adored him, or maybe she just adored who she became when she was with him. Before Richard, she was quiet, cautious. After Richard, she was a woman who needed a bigger life. A woman who talked about Tidewater Inn not as a home, but as an anchor dragging her down. They'd been living at the inn rent-free for 3 years. Richard called it helping out. What that meant in practice was that he sat on the porch drinking expensive bourbon, complaining about the Wi-Fi, and occasionally moving a piece of furniture when Wren asked him 4 times. My mother's contribution was slightly more subtle. She'd hover around Grandma June, performing care, fluffing pillows while ignoring medication schedules, posting photos on Facebook of herself holding Grandma's hand with captions like, "My whole world," while forgetting to actually sit with her for more than 10 minutes. I'm the co-trustee on Grandma June's account. Grandpa Walt set it up that way because, his words, Sienna's the only one in this family who counts things twice. For the past 8 months, I'd been watching the numbers shift. Small withdrawals at first. Dock repairs, Richard would say. New linens for the guest rooms, my mother would claim. Specialist appointment for Mama June. But the dock repairs cost more than a new dock. The linens never appeared. And the specialist visits left no paper trail with any doctor's office in the state of Maine. They were bleeding the account. Slowly, carefully, and then not so carefully at all. I tried talking to Wren about it one night. She was frosting a 3-tier cake for a weekend wedding reception at the inn. Her hands steady, but her eyes glassy with exhaustion. "Sienna, please," she whispered. "I can't do this tonight. I've been up since 4. Mom says it's all for the inn. It's not for the inn, Ren. Then what do you want me to do about it? She didn't say it with anger. She said it with surrender. And that's worse. The first real alarm went off about 10 weeks ago. I was filing quarterly taxes in the back office when Richard walked in, which was unusual because Richard avoided that room the way most people avoid the dentist. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, wearing that smile he uses when he wants something. Hey, kiddo. Quick question. That trust account, it's at Coastal Heritage Bank, right? My pen stopped moving. Why? Oh, your mom was just wondering. She wants to set up auto pay for some of the inn's bills. Make things easier on you. Less on your plate. I looked at him. In 5 years of fraud investigation, I interviewed hundreds of liars. The good ones control their faces. The great ones control their breathing. Richard was neither. His jaw was tight. His foot was tapping. The bills are already on auto pay, Richard. I set that up 2 years ago. Right. She just thought maybe there were some new ones. There aren't. He held my gaze for a beat too long, then shrugged. No worries. Just trying to help. He walked away whistling. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed in the small room above the kitchen, the one I'd slept in since I was a girl, and I listened to the ocean through the window. Something was wrong. Not wrong in the vague, anxious way that keeps you up. Wrong in the specific, documented, pattern of behavior way that makes a fraud investigator's hands itch for a spreadsheet. The next morning, I started digging. It took me 3 days. I pulled every transaction on the trust account going back a year. I cross-referenced every withdrawal against actual invoices, receipts, and vendor payments for the inn. The gap was staggering. In 12 months, $87,000 had been withdrawn for supposed inn expenses. Only $31,000 of that matched any real expense. The other $56,000 had vanished into cash withdrawals and transfers to an account I didn't recognize. I traced that account. It belonged to a company called Pura Vida Holdings, LLC, registered in Delaware, with a mailing address that led to a virtual office. The registered agent was Richard. My stepfather had created a shell company and was funneling my grandmother's trust money through it. I felt sick, but I kept going. I found the Costa Rica connection buried in my mother's email. She'd left her laptop open on the kitchen table one morning while she went to get coffee. I know. But when you're protecting a woman with dementia from her own daughter, you stop worrying about manners. There were dozens of emails with a real estate agent in Guanacaste, Costa Rica, a luxury villa in a gated community, 3 bedrooms, infinity pool, ocean view. The asking price was $410,000. They'd already wired a $40,000 earnest money deposit from Pura Vida Holdings. My grandmother's money was buying my mother a villa in Central America. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I found in the county records. 2 weeks before the first wire transfer, Richard had taken out a $95,000 home equity line of credit against Tidewater Inn, the property that belonged entirely to my grandmother. He had forged her signature on the loan documents. I sat in the records office staring at the screen, my vision blurring. The HELOC was already drawn down to $62,000. The first payment was due in 23 days. If it wasn't paid, the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings. On my grandmother's inn. They weren't just stealing from the trust. They were mortgaging the roof over our heads to fund their escape, and they were planning to leave before anyone found out. I drove back to the inn in silence. No radio, no podcast. Just the sound of my own breathing and the cold clarity settling into my bones like winter. I know that feeling. I felt it dozens of times sitting across from people who'd burned down their own businesses for insurance money. The moment where everything emotional falls away and all that's left is the math, the evidence, the next move. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is a luxury. I was operational. That evening, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to an attorney named Claire Prescott, who specialized in elder law and financial exploitation. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said, "You need to move fast, Sienna. What they've done is criminal. But the trust money, you can still protect that legally." The second call was to the bank. As co-trustee, I had full authority to freeze the account pending a review. The bank officer sounded relieved. She told me the withdrawal pattern had flagged internally, but they hadn't been sure who to contact. I froze the account effective 9 a.m. the next morning. The third call was to Ren. I asked her to meet me in the kitchen after the last guest went to bed. She came downstairs in her pajamas, flour still under her fingernails. I told her everything. I showed her the spreadsheets, the LLC documents, the real estate emails, the forged HELOC. She didn't cry. She just sat very still, staring at the numbers, and then she said something I'll never forget. I kept making their breakfast every morning. Sienna. Every single morning. And the whole time they were planning to leave us. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest of my life. I had to act normal, smile at Richard across the dinner table, let my mother kiss Grandma June on the forehead, watch them pack their suitcases in small increments, thinking nobody noticed. A winter coat disappeared from the closet, then a jewelry box, then the good luggage. My mother started talking about how tired she was, how she needed a change of scenery, how maybe she and Richard should take a little vacation. "You girls have everything under control here," she said one evening, squeezing my hand. "We're so proud of how you've taken over." Taken over? Like it was a gift they were giving us instead of a mess they were leaving behind. The night before they left, I heard them. I was on the stairs, heading down for water, and I heard Richard's voice from behind their closed bedroom door. Low, excited. 40 days and we'll be sitting on that terrace, Diane. No more frozen pipes. No more guests complaining about the hot water. No more pretending we care about this place. But what about Mama? My mother asked. A pause. What about her? She doesn't even know what day it is half the time. The girls handle everything anyway. It's not like she's going to miss us. And the loan? By the time they figure that out, we'll be residents of another country. What are they going to do? Send the Maine sheriff to Costa Rica? They both laughed. My mother laughed about losing her own mother's home. I went back upstairs. I didn't need water anymore. I needed something harder, but I didn't drink. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and reviewed every document one more time. I checked the frozen account confirmation. I checked Claire Prescott's court filing timeline. I checked the evidence folder I'd created, labeled, organized, and backed up in 3 locations. Everything was ready. All I had to do was let them walk into it. The morning they left was a Tuesday. Bright, crisp. The kind of Maine morning that makes the ocean look like hammered silver. Richard loaded the car while my mother made a show of saying goodbye. She held Grandma June's face in both hands. "I love you, Mama. We'll call every week." Grandma June smiled and said, "Have a nice trip, dear. Where are you going again?" "Just a little vacation, Mama." "Oh, that's nice. Bring me back some of that taffy I like." Wren stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, her face a mask. She didn't hug them. She didn't wave. She just watched. "Be good, girls," Richard called from the car, sunglasses on, arm out the window like a man in a car commercial. "Hold down the fort." The gravel crunched as they drove away. The inn was so quiet I could hear the clock in the front parlor ticking. Wren looked at me. "How long?" "3 days," I said. "Maybe 4. It was 3. At 7:14 on a Friday evening, I was helping Grandma June with a jigsaw puzzle in the sunroom when my phone rang. Unknown number. Country code 506. Costa Rica. I let it ring 4 times. "This is Sienna Caldwell," a very polished, very stressed voice. "Miss Caldwell? Good evening. This is Alejandro, guest services manager at Villa Serena Residences in Guanacaste. I'm calling regarding a Mr. Richard and Mrs. Diane Mercer. They've listed you as their emergency financial contact. I'm aware of them. We have a somewhat delicate situation. The second installment on their property reservation, $85,000, was declined. We've attempted the transaction 3 times. The account appears to be frozen." In the background, I could hear Richard. Not the smooth, charming Richard. The other one, the real one. He was shouting, something about his stepdaughter, about theft, about calling his lawyer. "Miss Caldwell, Mr. Mercer is suggesting that this may be some kind of error or perhaps unauthorized interference with his finances." "It's not an error, Alejandro. And they're not his finances." I paused. "The account they were attempting to use belongs to a trust fund established for my grandmother's medical care and the preservation of a family property. I'm the co-trustee. I froze the account because there's an ongoing investigation into unauthorized withdrawals." Silence from Alejandro. More shouting from Richard. Then my mother grabbed the phone. "Sienna, what have you done? You've humiliated us. We're standing in this office and these people think we're criminals. Mom, you took $56,000 from Grandma's trust through a shell company. Richard forged her signature on a $95,000 loan against her property. You are criminals. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard. "You have 48 hours to get on a plane and come home," I said. "I'll wire enough for 2 economy tickets. That's all you're getting. When you arrive, there will be a meeting with our attorney. If you don't come back voluntarily, the next call won't be from me. It'll be from the district attorney's office." My mother started crying. Not the performative tears I'd seen her deploy at family dinners and PTA meetings. Real tears. Ugly, panic tears. "You can't do this to your own mother. You did this to yours." I hung up. They came back 4 days later. Tanned, believe it or not. Even in crisis, my mother had found time to sit by a pool. Ren and I were waiting in the inn's back office with Claire Prescott, and every piece of documentation spread across the table in 2 neat folders. I didn't offer them coffee. I didn't ask about their flight. I slid the folders across the table. "Folder 1, I said. "Complete accounting. Every withdrawal traced and categorized. $56,000 funneled through Pura Vida Holdings LLC into your Costa Rica real estate transaction. Every wire transfer documented." Richard's face went gray. "Folder 2. The HELOC. $95,000 borrowed against this property using a forged signature. Currently in default. First payment was due 3 days ago. If it's not resolved, Coastal Heritage Bank initiates foreclosure on Tidewater Inn, on Grandma's home." My mother looked at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "That's not." Richard handled all of that. "I didn't know about the loan. Your email correspondence with the Costa Rica realtor references the loan proceeds directly. Mom, you knew." Claire Prescott laid out the options. Option A. Sign over full ownership and management of Tidewater Inn to Ren and me. We would use funds from the protected trust account to pay off the fraudulent HELOC and prevent foreclosure. In exchange, no criminal charges would be filed. They would be allowed to live in the small caretaker's cottage on the property's edge, the one Grandpa Walt used to use for storage. Supervised visits with Grandma June only. Richard would be required to perform maintenance work on the inn as partial restitution. Full financial monitoring for 5 years. Option B. Refuse. Claire files a criminal complaint for elder financial exploitation, forgery, and fraud. The bank forecloses. Everyone loses the inn, and my mother and Richard face felony charges in the state of Maine. Richard opened his mouth. For a moment, I thought he was going to argue, going to threaten, bluster, try to flip the table the way he always did. But he looked at the evidence. He looked at Claire Prescott. He looked at me. And whatever he saw in my face, it wasn't the quiet stepdaughter who used to clear his dinner plate without being asked. "This is extortion," he muttered, but there was no fight left in his voice. "This is accountability," Claire replied. "And frankly, Mr. Mercer, it's generous." My mother signed first. Her hand was shaking so badly the pen almost slipped. Richard signed after her, jaw clenched, staring at the wall. That was 5 months ago. Tidewater Inn is still standing. The HELOC is paid off. The trust is intact, managed now by me and Ren alone, with an independent trustee added as a safeguard. Ren launched a new summer menu that got written up in a regional food magazine. We hired a part-time caregiver for Grandma June, a wonderful woman named Patrice who sings old standards while she helps Grandma with her exercises. Last Sunday morning, I was sitting on the porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise paint the water gold, when I saw Richard pushing a wheelbarrow full of mulch toward the garden beds. He was wearing old work boots and a flannel shirt, no sunglasses, no bourbon, no commentary. Behind him, my mother was on her knees pulling weeds along the stone path, her manicured nails caked with dirt. She looked up and saw me watching. For a second, something flickered across her face. Shame, maybe. Or grief for the life she thought she deserved instead of the one she earned. I didn't wave. I just sipped my coffee and went inside to check on Grandma. She was in the kitchen, standing at the counter, trying to shell pecans. Her hands were slower now, shakier. But she was humming that same old hymn. "These are good ones, Sienna," she said, smiling up at me. "Your grandfather would have loved these." "He sure would have, Grandma." I kissed the top of her head and picked up a pecan. Some mornings she remembers everything. Some mornings she doesn't remember my name. But she always remembers this kitchen. She always remembers the inn. And as long as I'm breathing, she always will. Ren came in through the back door, flour on her apron, carrying a tray of fresh scones. She set them on the counter and looked at me. No words, just a look. The look that says, "We did it. We're still here. We held the line." Sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting the people who hurt you. It's accepting that the people who were supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. Ren and I didn't save Tidewater Inn by being brave. We saved it by being honest about who our parents really were. And once we stopped pretending, once we let go of the mother we wished we had, we finally became the women our grandmother raised us to be. If you're still listening, I want you to know something. You're not a bad person for drawing a line. You're not ungrateful for protecting yourself. And you are not alone. The anchor in the family always thinks they have to hold the weight in silence. But silence is what people like my mother count on. Don't give it to them. The inn is open, the scones are warm, and Grandma June is safe. That's all that matters.